Hello, everyone. It is a great pleasure to announce Farmer Veteran Coalition's first ever episode on our very own Heroes of the Harvest podcast. This is something we've been working on for a very long time, and we are happy to finally make it available for you all to listen. My name is Diego Laredo, the Digital Marketing Outreach Specialist for FEC, and your host. Joining us for our very first episode is Amanda Blount. Amanda, a native of Mackeys, North Carolina, grew up on a family farm where they cultivated tobacco, corn, peanuts, and engaged in herring fishing during colder months. In her adult life, Amanda embarked on a military career, ultimately retiring from the U.S. Army after 2 decades of dedicated service as a logistics and ordnance officer. She also retired from the Department of Defense, where she excelled in roles as a Level 2 contract specialist, government grant writer, and grant manager, where she specialized in emergency and disaster contracting projects. Amanda also holds a bachelor's degree in business and behavioral science. Amanda's notable achievements include the creation of a community-based ecology leadership program that received recognition and grant funding from the AT&T Pioneers. She's also played a pivotal role in helping various nonprofits secure public and essential grants in Montgomery County. I enjoyed speaking with Amanda and hearing all about what she had to offer, and I'm excited for you to hear it as well. Enjoy. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Yes. Well, like you said, my name is Amanda Blount. I'm from Mackeys, North Carolina originally. I traveled all over the world with military, and I really enjoyed the military while I was in, but a lot of the things that I saw in the military, I really wanted to change. But of course, being in the military, I didn't have the time nor the resources to change. And now that I have retired, I have the education, the time, and the resources to help change some problems that are in our country, in our communities, and hopefully in the world.
That's nice to know. Tell me, what made you want to do this? Like anything from your personal background or anything from your time on the farm in North Carolina? What made you want to do this kind of work?
Well, I was raised on a farm where food was so important. I mean, from the beginning of planting and then harvesting and fishing, my family weren't just farmers. My dad was also a fisherman. Everything around a traditional family revolves around food, and especially in communities, and how we share food and how we do our traditions and how we share, togetherness. And it's normally around food. And it's just not in America, and it's just not in the South. You find that in many countries. And that just kind of stuck with me when I was little on how important food is to your life. And one of the sad parts about where I was raised is that there are two Superfund sites, which are very polluted areas. And in these areas, the groundwater became polluted the farms, polluted the rivers, polluted the sounds, and a lot of the food was ruined. The farms are now bouncing back, and the Albemarle Sound is bouncing back. And these things are healing, but for a long time, you have a lot of pollution that ruins farming and ruins fishing and ruins a lot of things, the livelihood and the traditions around communities. Now, as I matured and found out that other communities face these same things, I found out that it's not just my area. It happens a lot in marginalized communities, especially rural communities that don't have the resources to fight back against, huge corporations that bring in a lot of pollutions into farmland and into water streams and rivers where people are drinking the water downstream, or they have wells. A lot of rural communities do have wells, and that pollution gets into the well water, and they don't have the resources to fight back. And then their farms fail, and then many go bankrupt and lose their farms, and we're losing farmlands constantly. This isn't just happening in rural areas. In marginalized urban areas where poverty is higher in certain areas, a lot of pollution is there too, where you can't have community gardens because the pollution is so high, and food and mental health is affected greatly. So this became a passion project of mine throughout my life. Every year I would learn something new, and it would just astound me that these things were happening. And I just kind of really became passionate about fighting all these different problems.
Whenever leaving the army, like what did you first do? What kind of projects did you first begin? What kind of work did you first get started on, and that kind of stuff?
When I first left the Army, I actually took a film class because what I wanted to do and took some graduate classes, my first goal is to create community groups where they can tell their story from their own backyard. And the project that I came up with earned a grant from AT&T Pioneers, where I teach young people, and I'm willing to teach adults, but this particular class was for young people. I want people to not think that, oh, I have to travel to another country to do good. I have to travel to another country to be a documentary, to do a documentary. No, you can do it from your own backyard. You can tell about your ecology problems, your conservation problems, your sustainability problems straight from your own backyard using your cell phone. You can tell a story, you can write it, you can properly bring it to the correct people and to the correct leaders of your community. And that's what my 8 to 12 week program teaches people is from the very basic. Let's start with using your cell phone to correctly, speak about the problems in your community, interview people. What are you facing? What are the pollution? What are the problems that you're facing that you can't get good food and you can't get nutritional food, or you don't have green spaces in your community? You're interviewing people with your cell phone and you're documenting it. Then you put it on, social media, and then you bring that to the correct leaders in your area, and hopefully you can make some change that way, one person at a time. I say it's 1 acre at a time is kind of like my goal. 1 acre at a time, we're going to make change.
And do you have any projects from that were kind of your favorites or that really like struck a tone with you?
Yes, some of them really, some of the community students that came through my class, they were talking about, they didn't know about bees. They learned about bees. We talking about your story, because everybody has a story. We all have a story, and your story is just as important as my story. And, famous people throughout history told, they have their stories told. But your story in your backyard is just as important. And a lot of the kids were telling me, I didn't know that I was important, and I didn't know that I could tell stories about my little area. And I'm like, yes, you can. And that's very important. I want you to. I want you to talk about, if your ditch is clogged up. If you're 7 years old, you can do a video about your ditch being clogged up and the mosquitoes taking over your yard. These are very important aspects of, kids getting fresh air and going outside. And it's all related to being connected to our planet and connected back to agriculture. If kids don't want to go outside because it's dirty and it's and the ground isn't nice and they don't have a place to play and it's not green, well, they're not going to know how to get back to agriculture because that's not their thing, and that's not something that they're even interested in anymore. One of the things that I found, and it excites me to talk about this, is that a lot of marginalized people, whether it be the LGBTQ community or other races, when I talk to them about farming and microfarming and urban farming, I even had an older woman, a grandmother, come up to me and she goes, I just never even thought of doing that because I just honestly thought that was a rural person thing or something that I wasn't invited to do. It wasn't something that I would be interested in because no one ever invited me to become a farmer. No one ever taught me how to grow something because I could just go down to the grocery store. And I just found that interesting because I'm reaching people that hadn't thought about it, that didn't think that they belonged. And I believe that farming is for everybody. One of the things that I I do say a lot is that community gardens is what helped families and communities in World War II. The big 1,000-acre farms help feed the government and help feed the armies and the soldiers and everything. But it was the community gardens, the victory gardens in America and the community gardens in Europe that actually fed the people, the regular people and their regular communities. And we've gotten away from that. We're 3 generations away from community helping out each other and having small little victory gardens and stuff. And now they're called micro farms. And here's the difference: you can have a hobby farm, you can have a community garden, and that's fine. But now you can also have a micro farm and get help to do that for your community.
And that's a good segue for the next section is small scale and micro farming. What's the difference? What makes them similar? How can you explain that to a fifth grader?
Oh, that's fine. Yeah. So easy. Okay. So small scale farming is any size farm. So you can have 1,000 acres or you can have 100 acres or whatever. And as long as you are making $300,000, and let me get the actual term for you, $350,000 gross cash farm income from that. As long as it's less than that, 350,000 gross cash farm income, then that is considered small scale farming. A micro farm is easy. You can make as much as money as you can, but it's 5 acres or less. It is typically 5 acres or less. Now, there's some caveats in there too, because you can have a 1,000-acre farm and you might want to divide out a micro farm. Maybe you want to do a research project with an agriculture like at TSU, and which is Tennessee State University for people that are not in Tennessee. And maybe you want to partner with a professor of agriculture. You can divide out 5 acres of your big farm and create a micro farm within a larger farm.
So hypothetically speaking, so you said, so small scale, it kind of just depends on how much you make, right? And then micro scale is more of the size. So hypothetically speaking, what if like a micro farm ends up making like that much money? Then what happens to that? Is it still considered a micro farm, or does the name change?
It might be considered a small scale farm at that point, but that's going to be up to the USDA because it falls under different grant writing. When you're applying for grants and loans to the USDA, they may look at how much money you're making and the size of farm that you're on. So the basic definition of what I've gave you would get you started, and then it would be up to the USDA after that to determine where you are in the farming. Because even there's a farm grant for beginning farmers, and I'm not even for sure where that ends when you're no longer a beginning farmer. I don't know what the year is, or the amount that you're making makes you not a beginning farmer.
Yeah, it's always confusing with all these terminologies and stuff. So let's say someone wants to get into small scale micro farming. Mm-hmm. How do I know that's right for me? How do I know, like, where do I get started, stuff like that?
Well, and it's funny too, because I was watching a video today. There's a farmer called Shaw Farms on YouTube, and the video that I was watching today talked about exactly what we're talking about here. He talked about how him and his wife started years before they got into farming, and they actually did a garden at their house in DC. They started with a garden, and then they figured out, oh yeah, I kind of like this. I really want to get into this. And once they decided to buy another house, they had to make the decision, do we want to have a house with just a few acres and get a few chickens, and do we just want a hobby farm, or do we want to actually dive into farming? And they bought a big farm in Vermont and just started little. They started, step by step. But there's different ways into farming. There's so many different ways to do a micro farm. So if you want me to go into that, I can, because there are just so many different ways people have started micro farms, and it's very exciting. And I believe micro farms are the perfect way for someone to get into farming, because if you don't want to get into larger scale farming, and maybe that's not for you, 1,000 acres is a lot to manage. I mean, it's just not you. There's no way that one farmer can manage 1,000 acres. You're going to have employees and equipment, and there's a lot of technology involved. And so that's a big jump, even to a couple of 100 acres. So micro farming, I think, is a perfect way for a new generation to get into farming, because then it's like a test. it's like taking your toe into it and then really, working hard and seeing where you are at that point.
So tell me about an example of microfarming.
Microfarming, like I said, is 5 acres or less, no matter how much money you make on the farm. So one example would be maybe you purchase your home and you're paying your normal mortgage on your home, and you have 5 acres, which a lot of houses in Tennessee have 5 acres because that is the minimum amount in certain counties, including our county, to put a house on in certain areas. So anyway, so you have 5 acres and you decide, well, I want a micro farm. You're not paying any more on your mortgage. You can turn your whole backyard into a micro farm, with permissions and with, your license and everything. So it's a great way to start there in that instance because you're not paying any more on your mortgage. And in a couple of years, if you decide this is not what you want to do, you haven't lost your land. You haven't lost your home. You're still there. You just stop farming. Now, a lot of people, which is exciting, they're turning cruise ships into floating farms. They're turning silos and abandoned mines into underground farms. And there's farms in urban areas, which is something that I'm really excited about. I would love to see abandoned buildings turned into urban farms, including, make it look like a normal everyday business. You walk into the lobby and there's someone at the lobby right there welcoming you, and each floor might be a different type of farm. You might have aquaponics, you might have hydroponics, you might have mushrooms growing, you might have vertical farms growing. Each floor might be something different. And not only that, not only are you creating food for food deserts, but you're creating agricultural jobs and scientific research right there in urban areas.
Or is there a resource that you would recommend people look into before they actually begin microfarming?
Absolutely. The very first place that I would look would be the USDA and the FSA, the Farm Service Administration. Talk to them, find out the information that you can find from them, and then sign up for beginning farming academies that you might have in your state. I know we have a really great one here at TSU. Each service area has free classes. In fact, there's a women's conference going on Thursday and Friday here in Tennessee that teaches all kinds of things. They're going to be teaching canning and not hydroponics, but fruit trees and everything like that, horticulture. And get involved with your FSA and your extension offices. Oh, your extension offices, they are full of information. Just walk in and say, hey, I want to start a micro farm. What kind of information can you give me? Now, I'm going to be honest right here is that a lot of people are not involved in the micro farm community, or maybe that's not their area of expertise, and that's fine. What I want you to do is go to the people, no matter what office they're in, and just ask, what information do you have on micro farming in wherever area, rural or urban? Now, if they don't have all the information you need, don't blame them. This is a new and exciting thing that people are doing in the last few years. So say thank you, get your information, and go to the next person, and go to the next office, and go to trainings, and look up micro farming on the internet, and look up the USDA micro farming information, and take advantage of every class that they give, and just try to educate yourself really well before getting into it. And I promise you, there are people out there. You're going to reach one or two people out there who are going to be just as passionate as I am, and they're going to be like, yes, come with me. Let me show you how to do this.
And would you say like local farmers markets as well would be a good resource?
Yes, absolutely. Because not only one great thing about micro farms and small scale farming too, is that you don't have to just grow one thing. There's a 5-acre farm in Vermont. I was watching their video too. They have an entire, like 1/4 of their 5 acres is a solar farm. So when we're talking about farming, we need to change our our outlook on what farming means. And so they have a 1/4 line of solar. They have an entire solar farm, which is being paid for by the state to produce solar energy for their community. And then the Department of Transportation and I'm not quite sure what agency, but they're coming in and they're planting pollinators right around the solar because they can't use it for farming. So they're planting pollinator flowers right along where the solar panels are. And then he's using the rest of his 5 acres for grains and, different types of vegetables that he sells. But then on top of that, he makes money by educating people to come out and see, what he's doing on his 5 acres. And so you have all these byproducts that you can use on a 5-acre farm. You can set up compost areas. You can have a worm farm. You can have a pond where you are, raising fish. There's so many different things that you can do on a farm. And I think that's one of the big things that we need to do is change our mindset of what a farm looks like. As much as I remember that, as much as I want to hold on to that, I know that part of that is part of the future. We still need that. We still need big farms. And I love the big farmers as much as I love our micro farmers. But if we're going to get the new generation into farming, we really have to help them get into farming in a way that they don't feel like that they're going to fail, because they've seen so many farms fail. They see it on the news. They see it every day in their communities. They see farmers go bankrupt. So we need to get them in a way of farming that isn't going to set them up for failure. We need to set them up for success and prosperity.
What's the most unique kind of microfarm that you've seen?
Oh, okay. So this is in Memphis.
Okay.
There's a gentleman in Memphis, Tennessee, and he has aquaponics and hydroponics. Now, part of that is he has fish, tilapia. He has tilapia as part of his farming, in the hydroponics and aquaponics. So what he does is not only does he sell the water because he has to change out his water every now and then, he can sell the water as, enriched water that you can put on your own garden. He sells the fish. Once they get to a certain size, he can't have them in his machines. He sells the fish. He's got all these byproducts that he is selling, and it's just in an urban area. It's amazing. I find that really interesting. Another interesting thing that I have come across recently, which I haven't seen personally, but one of the largest mushroom growers in our country is in an abandoned mine. It's underground. And in fact, they were interviewing one of the employees, and when he first went to work on his first day, he could not believe how big the mushroom farm was in this big abandoned mine.
And where is this mine located at?
Oh, you had to ask me. I don't know. I don't know.
What about you? Is there any
Let me
crazy,
you mean look it up?
Oh no, is there any crazy ideas that you've tried with microfarming? Any unique ideas that you've tried that you would maybe pass along to someone else as well?
I'm really interested in peppers, and I think that's going to be my thing. I like peppers. I just, I've tried different things. I've had different gardens. Of course, cucumbers. Oh, one of the fun things that I did was lemon cucumbers one year. That was fun. So yeah, I like to try different things. And on a micro farm, you can do that. You can try different things. And if you fail on one part of your vegetable, it's okay, because you can make up profits in another area, especially if you're just going to grow a few plants a year just to try it out and see how it tastes and see how it looks and see how, your family or friends might like it. So yeah, micro farming, it's hard. And I tell this in the class, micro farming, because for instance, if you have a large farm, there are, ways that you can make up your profits if something goes wrong. If part of your farm gets eaten up, then you can make up in a different way. Microfarm has some of the hardest things that you will ever deal with, but in a different way. Like, the profit margin is still small. Like, you still have to work. Microfarming is not just something that you can set and forget. You need to make sure that your technology is up to date. You need to make sure that your plants are doing well. You still need to get up and go to work and check on your farm and make sure that you're pruning and doing all the right things that you're supposed to do. This isn't, somebody said, oh, it's the lazy man's farming. And I'm like, no, actually it's very labor intense, because the nature's not doing any of this. Unless you're doing it outside. And now a lot of people do it. I'm talking about the urban areas where you've got the warehouses and the containers and stuff. So you become in some of these micro farms, you become Mother Nature. You're going to have to make sure that your plants are getting the right watering. You're going to have to make sure that they're getting the right nutrients and all this stuff. So I'm not saying that this is a lazy man's way of farming. I'm saying that this is a different way of farming. There's risk in farming no matter which way you go. And I would never tell anyone that there's not a risk. But I do believe that if you want to get into farming, I believe that micro farming is a great way to put your toe into it and see if this is for you. Some people go out and buy a 200 or 300 acre farm and bam, they're at it. They're rocking and rolling. This was their passion all along. But we have a lot of people that have never even grown a cucumber in their life, that don't know where potatoes come from, and they're starting from the very basic. And it's not their fault. A lot of this stuff was taken out of schools years ago. Like, even when I was in school, when I was younger, we had to grow a potato, just a simple potato, just to talk about biology and where your food comes from. And a lot of that has been taken out of schools. And I feel so bad because, I talk to people all the time and they're like, I don't know how to grow anything. I've got a black thumb. I'm like, honestly, you don't have a black thumb. You have a lack of education that is not your fault. It's not your fault that you can't grow something. It is actually society's fault, because that has been taken out of the schools. That has not been a part of your life. And I want to change that for people. I want to change that for anyone who is interested.
So what would you say some common do's and don'ts for someone getting into small scale or micro farming? What should they try to do? What should they try to avoid? Things you would encourage people to do, stuff like that.
To do, number one, education. And there's lots of free education out there, low cost free education. And even if you find a class that has a cost on it, say like it's, $100 or something, you're like, oh, I can't afford to go to that class, because call them up. The USDA, they have different programs for different people, and they have sponsors too. It may not be, public, but a lot of these classes do have extra slots for people. I'm not saying all of them do. I'm saying some of them do. And so don't give up. If you find a class that you're interested in, just call them up and say, hey, I really want to do this, but I'm new and I don't have the money to go to this class. Do you have a sponsorship? And don't forget YouTube. I am telling you, YouTube is a wealth of information out there. Of course, be careful what you're looking at, but the USDA, the FSA, and the extension offices, they all have YouTube pages. And it doesn't have to be just your state. If you can't find what you're looking for in your state, look at other states, because they have information too. And it's just amazing how much free information is out there.
And what other don'ts would you say?
Oh, do not believe the hype that you're going to get rich overnight. This is not an overnight process, because just like anything, there's failure rates, there's risk involved. This is something that's going to take time for you to learn. Any new skill, even art, anything that you're doing around the house, it's a new skill. So be prepared that some of this might fail. So one of the don'ts is don't believe that you're going to get rich overnight. Don't believe that, your venture is going to take off. Now, that's great. I'm so proud of you. Yay. But don't believe that somebody, when somebody comes up to you and go, oh, hey, buy this, and go into this because it's going to make you rich overnight. It's
Fair
hard
enough.
work.
What's the next step? How can I promote my business? What kind of marketing tips would you recommend? What's the next step to that?
I definitely recommend social media. Now, and as I tell people, look, if you are already a long-term farmer and you have those contracts in place and you are very satisfied with the profit margin that you are making and you're satisfied with what's happening in your life, no, social media may not be for you, because here's the problem. Social media, again, is a new skill. It's a new skill. You'll have to take time to learn that new skill if you don't already know it. So if someone is already in a place in their lives where they're like, okay, I'm completely satisfied with the contracts that I have, with what I sell, with everything I do, I'm not going to push social media on them. A lot of people say, oh, everybody needs to get social media. No, honestly, they don't, because if it's taking time away from what they're doing to make profits, then it's a profit loss, and that time can be spent somewhere else better. But if you are new and you go to the farmers markets and you have a very niche commodity, oh my goodness, like maybe you have a special pepper or maybe you have a special jam, and you want to get your item out to the public, I fully agree that people should try to use social media. One of the farmer that I was talking about in Vermont, he originally started his social media page because he started raising ducks and he wanted people to know that he had duck eggs. He wanted to reach more bakers, because a lot of bakers like to use duck eggs, and a lot of health people in nutrition, they like to use duck eggs. So he wanted to get that information out there because it's a kind of a niche commodity in his area. So yeah, using social media is a great resource to get your information out there to people who may want your product. I think it's a great way to market yourself. Farming is a business, and I think a lot of people forget that, is that farming is a business. Businesses must market themselves to make money. So when you look at it like that, it just makes sense that you're going to have to market yourself to get the customers to come to you.
And for you personally, what has worked and what hasn't when it comes to social media and marketing?
Well, for me personally, I'm just in the beginning stages of my own little farm, my own micro farm. But one of the great things is that people know that I love peppers, and I didn't even mean to set out to market my peppers, because I don't really sell them. I kind of give them away, or I give things away that I have grown, because I'm not at that stage yet in my life where I want to, go to the farmers markets all the time. So it's kind of neat because I have used social media, taking pictures of my peppers, doing videos of my peppers, and everybody's like, oh yeah, you love peppers. So it's kind of neat because I accidentally branded myself and it's funny too, because I have people in New York that I know in New York, and they're like, oh yeah, she has a garden. She does this and she does this and she's in farming and she does micro farming. And so a lot of people, I've accidentally branded myself in this community because I use social media, and I didn't even mean to use it that way. I meant to tell about my day and what I was doing and the things that I like to do. And yet, yeah, so people know that once I get to the point where I open up my farm store, which I'm working on now, they already have an idea of what I'm all about and what I'm doing. So
What about for others? Why is there people that tell us like, oh, I can't do social media, I can't do marketing, that's just not me? What do you tell them, or how do you help them to work around it?
honestly, you know what? About 2 years ago, I actually hired a social media coach because I knew how to use Facebook, I knew how to use Twitter, I knew how to use different things, but I'm a better writer and I'm a better photographer than I am on video. So, it's kind of awkward and doing the videos. And she was like, just do it. Just post it. Honestly, nobody cares. And if you don't like it in a day or two, delete it. So that's one of the great things is that just post pictures. I was posting just pictures to begin with and nothing of myself at first. I was just posting pictures of, my gardens and like putting words over it. So you don't have to be on camera yourself if you don't, if you're kind of awkward at first, because I was very awkward at first, looking at myself and my cell phone going, oh, I don't know what to say. People are going to judge me and everything. And guess what? Absolutely nobody cares. And I think that's the one thing we kind of have to get over ourselves is that if you have friends that are in the same community, they're just going to be happy to see that you're doing good. They're just happy to see your videos. And honestly, the rest of the people, they don't care. They're not paying you no mind. So yeah, just get out there and start taking pictures of what you do and what you offer. For instance, I know a lady who has started making candles, her own candles out of her home. And she's not in the videos. She's not in the photos. She takes very nice pictures of her candles and posts them on social media and people buy them. As she goes to farmers market, she sells her candles there. And it's just really neat because I'm watching her grow. I'm watching her grow from the beginning. And now she's growing really big. And like, it's kind of neat because I'm her friend and I want her to succeed. And I think that's where we are at, when you're on social media, your friends really do want you to succeed. And again, if you don't like the video or if you don't like the picture, in a couple of days, just delete it. It's not, it's okay.
Fair enough. And that's often something that I had to think about as well, especially managing social media for FEC. For me, it's a wider audience. So I'm always second guessing the post or just thinking like, oh, should I say this? Should I say that? But at the end of the day, just got to hit send or post.
Just hit send. Yeah, just hit post or just hit send because your friends are going to love to see you. And the people that are not necessarily your friends, they don't care. They really don't. They'll just scroll through.
Any particular platforms that work better than others? Like, for example, Facebook, TikTok. I know that one's really new now, but...
Well, okay, see, here's the thing. There's a lot of farms that are on TikTok that are doing very well, and I'm so proud of them. Me personally, I don't do well on TikTok. I came in late of TikTok, and it's like, I'm still not to that point. I have an account, but honestly, for me, Instagram, I had a wonderful, absolutely wonderful following on Twitter at one point, and then of course, I got blown up. But so that's another lesson that I really want people to understand. Even though you're marketing on social media, do not put all your eggs in one basket. A lot of people are now diversifying after, they figured out that, oh yeah, these companies, they're not thinking of me. They're going to do what they want to do. So I need to diversify. So make a video and post it on 3 different Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, just post it. And even if you keep your, for instance, I have an account that I keep private and I keep that private because I do upload things to it, but it's kind of like a backup account. For instance, if something happened to my account and it got hacked or something, it has all the same information, so it's kind of a private and then I can just make it public. So even if you don't use all your accounts, which it's very difficult to keep up with all the people all the time, what you can do is just upload all your same information that you're uploading. Say, let's just say you're doing Instagram and your YouTube is private. You keep uploading the same thing from Instagram to YouTube, keep it private. And if something happens or you decide that, oh yeah, I want to do YouTube now, then you just make it public and it's full of information there already. You don't have to start from scratch.
Just been a lot of information, a lot to take in. We're getting close to the end of the episode. I do want to ask you just one more thing. So again, microscale and small scale farming. I want to repeat it again. How does one get into it? Just one more time to just really get the point across for our listeners.
Honestly, just decide that's what you want to do. I really think, get information from the USDA, get information from the FSA, Figure out how much money that you can spend and that you can afford on what property that you want. The information is out there. You just have to start digging for it. And I'm not saying that this is going to happen overnight. And I am not saying that you're going to find the perfect property overnight. One of our people in our particular area said something that really hit me. You're not ever going to find the perfect property. You're going to have to find a property that you can accept for all of its flaws and make it your perfect property. Make it something that you can accept. And I like that because every property comes with flaws. Figure out how to use those flaws to your advantage. So you're just going to have to go out and get information, decide this is what you want to do. You don't have to do everything overnight. Please don't. Don't jump in and do too much overnight. Don't spend $100,000 on technology. Just start slow. Start slow. Figure out what you want to do. And it's okay if you change later. It's perfectly okay. So that's it.
Well said. And I think that just about wraps it up for today. Any final thoughts, any final words of wisdom you'd like to share with our listeners, Amanda?
I truly believe that we need to change our mindset of what a farm looks like. That is my pitch right there. When you are looking at starting a farm, just think about all the different ways that you can do it. And that's it.
Yeah. Thank you, Amanda, for your time. I really appreciate it. And I know our listeners will appreciate all the information that you shared.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. That concludes our very first episode of Heroes of the Harvest. We hope you enjoyed listening to us just as much as we did. Thank you to Amanda for her time and for sharing with us the wealth of knowledge she had to offer on small scale and microfarming. For those interested in learning more, you can reach out to her via email at therealamandablount, spelled BLOUNT, @gmail.com, or follow her on Instagram at therealamandablount, also spelled the same way. Please share this podcast with your colleagues and anyone that you think will benefit from it. We plan on sharing a multitude of information that we believe will be useful for FSC members and farmers alike. Also, if you have any topics that you'd like for us to talk about, reach out to us via email at support@farmvetco.org or via Facebook or Instagram at Farmer Veteran Coalition. One last thing I would like to end on is to remind you all that the Farmer Veteran Fellowship Fund will be opening next month on January 3rd, 2024. Be on the lookout on our social media pages and newsletter for more information on that. If you haven't subscribed to us yet, I highly recommend you do so that you don't miss out on any vital information. Thank you and see you next time. Also, happy holidays.